That night, I just wanted to take a walk, release the stress of a tiring day. But there was one place that always piqued my curiosity, the old playground on the outskirts of town, rumored to be haunted by restless spirits. People in the area always warned me, never go in there after dark, but I didn't believe in superstitions. Until that night. The playground always felt strange to me. Every time I passed its rusty iron gates, something made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was as if I was being watched. This time, I decided to go in. Something was pulling me, perhaps just sheer curiosity. I stepped inside, and when the gate closed behind me with a loud creak, I knew I had made the wrong decision. An old swing creaked softly, even though there was no wind. In the distance, the carousel slowly spun, but the sounds of children's laughter that usually filled this place had long vanished. Only silence remained. The darkness of the night grew thicker, and the air felt cold, biting into my bones. I felt like something was lurking, and my heart began to race. But I wasn't alone. In the midst of the darkness, suddenly, I heard the sound of a child laughing. It echoed from the corner of the playground, as if someone was playing hide and seek. My heart almost stopped. Isn't this playground supposed to be abandoned? No one dares to come here, let alone a child. Who's there? I asked, my voice trembling. There was no answer. The sound grew closer, like small footsteps running toward me. I spun around, hoping to catch sight of who was toying with me. But there was nothing, just shadows of trees and worn-out rides. Yet, when I looked at the swing again, something had changed. On one of the previously empty swings, now sat a child. His clothes were ragged, and his face was pale, as if he had never seen the sun. The child stared at me with a blank expression, then suddenly smiled. The child began to swing on his own, even though there was no wind. His eyes remained fixed on mine, empty and terrifying. There was something inhuman about the way he looked at me. I backed away slowly, trying to distance myself from the swing, but the sound of laughter grew louder with each step. Then, the child stopped swinging. He stood up slowly and suddenly vanished into the darkness. But I knew he hadn't left. The sound of footsteps was now behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing. Just a silence so deafening it hurt my ears. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just any ordinary playground. There was something more than just a creepy atmosphere. This playground held a dark secret, and the spirits trapped within wouldn't let anyone leave easily. I tried to calm myself. Maybe it was all just my imagination, I thought. I walked toward the carousel in the center of the playground. Despite being old and rusted, it was still spinning slowly, as if someone had been riding it. I approached the carousel, feeling something strange. As I got closer, I saw the shadow of someone sitting in one of the seats. Their face was invisible, hidden beneath long, tangled hair. My heart pounded in my chest. Who was that? How could anyone else be here? The shadow suddenly moved, and without thinking, I took a few steps back. I could feel its presence growing more real. Something whispered in my ear, "You shouldn't be here." voice was clear, but when I turned, no one was there. I couldn't stay here any longer. Fear was starting to take over completely. I ran, hoping to escape this place. But my steps halted when I came upon a maze of hedges that hadn't been there before. My curiosity once again led me to enter, hoping to find a way out. The deeper I went into the maze, the more unfamiliar it became. The vines around me seemed alive, as if they wanted to grab me. I started running, but every path I took only led me back to the same spot. This maze was cursed. In one corner, I heard footsteps behind me, growing closer. But when I turned around, there was only thick fog shrouding everything. I felt like I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare. In desperation, I ran again, this time not caring where I was headed. I just wanted out of this place. However, my steps suddenly stopped when I saw bloody footprints on the ground. The footprints led to a small door in the middle of the maze, which hadn't been there before. The door was slightly ajar, and from within, I could feel a coldness that chilled me to the bone. Something was waiting on the other side, calling to me. But I knew, if I went in, there might be no way back. I stood before the small door, my breath heavy and uneven. Something inside me told me not to go in, but my legs seemed to ignore the warning. The door creaked open as I pushed it wider, and the icy air that poured out from within made my body shiver. Inside, there was only darkness so thick it felt like staring into an endless abyss. With a heavy heart, I stepped in. The walls around me felt cold and damp, smeared with something I couldn't clearly see. The bloodstains on the ground grew more numerous, guiding my steps down a narrow, long corridor. Every footfall echoed, as if someone or something was following me from behind. But when I turned around, there was no one. After what felt like an eternity, the corridor ended in a large room. In the center stood a massive mirror, its surface gleaming despite the room's filth and decay. But what frightened me the most was what I saw in the mirror's reflection. In it, I saw myself but with a paler face, empty eyes, and a horrifying grin. The reflection didn't just stand still, it slowly moved closer from within the mirror's surface. I wanted to run, but my body was frozen. As the reflection approached, it suddenly pressed its hand against the mirror, and I felt a cold touch on my shoulder. The figure wasn't just in the mirror. It was here, with me, in this room. I stumbled back in panic, trying to distance myself from the mirror. But the shadow from the mirror wouldn't stop advancing. Suddenly, the mirror began to tremble violently, cracks appearing on its surface, and from those cracks emerged thick black smoke that started filling the room. Whispers filled my ears, the same whispers I'd heard in the playground. "You shouldn't be here. Leave, or we'll take you." Panic set in, and I began searching for an exit. But the room seemed to shrink, as if the walls were closing in on me. The black smoke thickened, and within it, I could see moving shadows. They looked like beings trapped between the worlds of the living and the dead. They stared at me with hollow eyes, ready to strike at any moment. I forced myself to move and finally found another door in a corner of the room. With a desperate push, I opened it and ran out, leaving the horrific room behind. whispers still echoed, growing louder and more deafening. "You can't escape. We will find you." I managed to escape the room, but the feeling of safety I hoped for didn't come. Back in the playground, everything felt different. The air was colder, and whenever I tried to find a way out, I always ended up in the same place. It was as if the playground was a living maze that continuously shifted, confusing me every time I thought I had found the exit. The sounds of children's laughter returned, now clearer and more numerous. They ran around, but I couldn't see them. Only shadows continued to dart around, as if they were toying with me. I tried to ignore my fear, but then I saw something that made my blood run cold. On top of the slowly spinning carousel stood the same child I had seen before. He looked at me with his vacant eyes, and suddenly he began to move. But this time, his movements were strange, not quite human. He floated down from the carousel and started approaching me swiftly. My heart pounded, and I wanted to run, but my body felt paralyzed. The child came closer, and as he was only a few meters away, he opened his mouth wide and screamed. The sound wasn't like any ordinary child's scream. It was as if thousands of spirits were screaming together, piercing my ears and making my head feel like it was about to explode. I collapsed to the ground, covering my ears, trying to block out the pain. But the scream only grew louder, and I knew if I didn't leave soon, I would die here. With the last of my strength, I got up and ran as fast as I could. I no longer cared which direction I was going, I just needed to get out of this place. However, every time I thought I had found the exit, I ended up back at the beginning. The playground seemed to play tricks on me. Every path I took was just an illusion. In the midst of my desperation, I realized something. This playground wasn't just haunted by spirits. It was a trap, and I was its prey. Like the spirits trapped here, they too might have once been people like me, lured by their own curiosity, only to become trapped forever. I stopped running, gasping for breath, and began to accept the grim reality. There was no way out. The whispers returned, now softer, as if the spirits were trying to comfort me. "Now, you are one of us." Before I could fully process what was happening, the scenery around me began to change. The eerie, dilapidated playground slowly faded, replaced by total darkness. There was only me and the voices, growing closer, clearer. And then, everything went black. The playground still stands on the edge of town, abandoned and forgotten by time. Each night, if you get close enough, you might hear the faint laughter of children or whispers coming from the darkness. But be cautious. Never be tempted to enter, for anyone who steps through the playground's gates will never leave again. This playground is no ordinary place. It is a place where restless spirits dwell, waiting for their next victim. And they will continue to wait until someone is bold enough to uncover its dark secrets.